You know, you guys, I'm just going to go ahead and jump straight into the Green Bay Packers at this point because this team has put together one of the best off seasons in the entire league up until this point when you combine what they did in free agency and what they were able to accomplish in the draft. They filled pretty much every need that they had, and if all of these players that they added turn out to be what I think they're going to, this team is going to be extremely scary to play against. But before we get into why I believe that, if you like Green Bay Packers content just like this, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any Green Bay Packers videos for the remainder of this offseason. Okay, so to get back on topic with the Green Bay Packers, this team, of course, is coming off a season where they found a way to make it to the divisional round of the playoffs with a first-year starting quarterback, which obviously blew over any expectations that anyone had. I don't think anyone expected them to make the playoffs, much less win a playoff game against the Dallas Cowboys in their own stadium. So the fact they were able to do that showed me a ton of promise in the future of this franchise, and now with what they've done this offseason, it's made me even more confident in that. First of all, when you look at the offense, the first thing we got to talk about just briefly is the fact that they did add Josh Jacobs at the running back position, and I have a good feeling that we're going to see Matt LaFleur use him in a lot of different ways, and he's going to make this offense even better than it was last year, which is pretty crazy to say. Now, even with that addition, they still needed to add something up front on the offensive line, which is why pretty much everyone expected them to draft offensive line if they had an opportunity to in this year's draft, and man, oh man, did they do just that by going out and drafting in the first round a tackle out of Arizona in Jordan Morgan. Jordan Morgan is a guy who is perfect value for this pick, and he literally has everything that you could ever want in a tackle prospect or in a prospect that you want to move into guard. The Packers offensive line situation is a bit weird. They're going to have to move a few guys around to make it fully work. So whether that's moving Zach Tom inside or leaving him at tackle and moving Jordan Morgan inside, I think either way they end up going, it's going to make this offensive line a lot better. So this addition alone immediately makes this Packers offense a lot better, but to add even more to the offense, they also went out in the third round and kind of surprised me by picking Marshawn Lloyd, a running back out of USC. I said earlier that they brought in Josh Jacobs, and I think he's going to change this offense completely, but I was surprised by this pick because they still had A.J. Dillon, and I thought he was going to be the main secondary back. But I guess that's not the case anymore because Marshawn Lloyd is most definitely going to come in and take a lot of snaps from A.J. Dillon, mainly due to the fact that he is just way more explosive. He might have a few kinks in his game when it comes to being patient behind the line of scrimmage, but outside of that, he can really do it all when he actually has the ball in his hands, because not only can he break pretty much any tackle that someone's going to try to throw at him, but he's also extremely fast on top of that, running a 4.46 40 at the combine, which is why I'm so high on this draft pick. And man, when you look at this offense with Marshawn Lloyd and Jordan Morgan added to it, you realize pretty quickly that they have pretty much everything an offense needs to be successful, especially when you consider that Matt LaFleur has proved himself to be a genius play caller as well. Jordan Love has proved himself already to be in that elite tier of quarterbacks. You've got Josh Jacobs, Marshawn Lloyd, and A.J. Dillon in the running back room. And then on top of that, you have a receiver room that's extremely young, that's only going to continue to get better. And they were already extremely good last year, which means this offense is going to be able to put up a lot of points. And that's not even mentioning the fact that you still have the two young tight ends to pair with all of this in Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. Luke Musgrave, of course, is the better tight end out of these two guys, but when we saw Luke go down with his injury last year and Tucker Kraft had to step in, he also played at an extremely high level, which is just crazy to say because you have two great options at the tight end position as well because of that. You can now get in those two tight end sets, and the defense has no idea if you're going to run or throw the ball because you can do either of them at an extremely high level, and it's just going to make this offense so much more dynamic and so much harder to stop. But even with the additions I've talked about on offense, they didn't really need to make many moves because they were going to be good regardless of that. The side of the ball that needed to make moves was this defense, and man, oh man, did they find a way to make that happen. Coming into this offseason, the Packers' biggest needs by far were at the safety position and at the linebacker position, and they made sure to address that first in free agency by going out and signing Xavier McKinney. Xavier McKinney is a guy that's only 24 years old, and up until this point, he has played extremely good football, and considering that he's only going to be going into his prime now, he's probably only going to get better, which is a great addition in my opinion, that I think is going to pay off big dividends. But even with the Xavier McKinney pickup, they still wanted to go out and add even more to to the safety room just to make sure there's a lot of competition in that room so they get the best players on the field. And they made that happen by going out in the draft and just drafting a plethora of guys. The first guy that they drafted at the safety position that I absolutely love is Javon Bullard out of Georgia, because he is exactly what I think a Packers player needs to be. He constantly plays like his hair is on fire, which just means that he's constantly going at 100 miles per hour looking at the next guy that he can hit, and that really allows him to be pretty dynamic because he can play in that nickel spot and do a great job against the run, or you can put him over the top because he's athletic enough to do that as well. He might only be 5'11", 195 on paper, but when you watch him on tape, he looks bigger due to the way he plays, and I think you'll notice that pretty quick as you start to watch him play on the field. I expect big things from this guy, and I think he's going to immediately step in and play a decent amount of snaps, and I think he's going to help this Packers defense be a lot better. Now, they didn't stop there though. They also went out and drafted Evan Williams, who might not be as good of an athlete as Javon Bullard, but he is huge at 6'1", 205, and he can do pretty much anything that you ask him to do. His play style is super dynamic, and he's a pretty good tackler while also being pretty good in coverage. So in the 4th round, I absolutely love this pick. He's going to bring a lot of competition to that room, which is exactly what the Packers wanted. Now, on top of that, they wanted to add a little bit more to the corner room too, because that was a bit of a weakness for the Packers as well, and they did that by first drafting Keton Oladapo in the 5th round with pick 169, and this is another great value pick in my opinion. He has great size at 6'1", 217, and even though it says his position is corner, you could also move him to safety if you want, because he has the frame at 6'1", 217, and he is extremely physical, which gives you a lot of options with where you want to play him. And then on top of that, way later in the 7th round with pick 255, you're able to get another pretty good steal in my opinion by drafting Kalen King out of Penn State. Kalen King, coming into the 2023 season, was supposed to be one of the best corners in all of college football, but due to him not having a great senior season, his draft stock fell pretty hard, so I like the fact that the Packers were able to get him this late because he has shown before that he can play at a high level. I mean, sometimes you just have a bad year, and I think that's more so what happened with Kalen King, because if he showed us that he can do it before, I don't know why he wouldn't be able to do it now. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Packers also wanted to add more to the linebacker room because that was a weakness as well coming into the offseason, and they were able to do that in the draft too in a very efficient way. In the 2nd round with pick 45, they were able to draft the best linebacker in this class in Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M. It was pretty consensus that this was the best linebacker in this class as we got closer and closer to the draft, and more people watched his tape because he has all the potential in the world. He's extremely athletic, and on top of that, he's huge at 6'3", 230. He's a guy that wants to fly downhill and hit you, and the more and more you look at this Packers draft class, I think that's kind of what they were going for. They're trying to build a nasty team that wants to come down and hit somebody, and Edgerrin Cooper fits that bill perfectly. Now, just like they did with the safety position, they wanted to bring in more than just one guy because they want competition in that room, and they did that by drafting Tyron Hopper in the 3rd round out of Missouri. Tyron Hopper is a little bit smaller than Edgerrin Cooper, but because of how quick he is, he's able to make people miss that come to try to block him, and that's where you see him make most of his plays. So he's a different type of linebacker than Edgerrin Cooper and the linebackers on this team, so I would expect him to come in and be used in a different type of way than everyone else on this team, which gives the Packers not only more competition, but also just a more dynamic room overall. And when I look at all these players that the Packers were able to draft to add to this defense, I actually start to get extremely confident in what they could potentially be. And when you think about that potential paired with what this offense has already proven they can be, things start to get extremely scary, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the Packers once again deep in the playoffs with a chance to contend for a Super Bowl in just year 2 of Jordan Love's stint.